Kia ora and welcome to Cinema in Context, where we discuss all things film and the connections between. My name is Jeremy Downing.
I'm William Chen.
I'm Sarah Watt.
And I'm Max Tarrant.
And each month at Cinema in Context, we discuss two films, one current and one retrospective, with some connection. It could be the same director, same actor, or a similar theme. This month, we are discussing Blade Runner, which came out originally in 1982 with multiple edits and changes throughout the last 35 years. And Blade Runner 2049, which came out this year and is a sequel to the original Blade Runner. So let's hear about Blade Runner from 1982. Max, you want to give us a bit of a rundown?
Sure, so obviously this film was directed by Ridley Scott. This is really in his heyday. It's kind of an unusual film. It was not received hugely well at the box office immediately, but became a cult hit over time, owing to its complex themes and powerful imagination of a dark future. It stars Harrison Ford, Rutger Hauer as the antagonist, and Sean Young apparently as Rachel, who is a replicant. So this film's about replicants, which are basically kind of cyborgs.
And it's worth noting, like I did mention earlier, there's been a number of different edits and chops and changes. So the story of Blade Runner coming to the screen is a good story, and I would suggest anyone who's interested to watch Dangerous Days, which is the 3-hour documentary that was put together that covers through 10 chapters the kind of journey of Blade Runner, which kind of details in all of the struggles that went into making this film happen. One of them being that the producers stepped in very, very sternly and took over the editing powers of much of the original film. And so the theatrical film, though Ridley Scott was involved, was sort of based on focus groups and things like that. So that was the theatrical cut. The ending being quite different. There's a voiceover that is debatable whether it works or not. There are camps and there are people in both camps for that. And then in the I think late 80s, early 90s, a work print edition kind of leaked out, which sort of to be whispers that this was the version that Ridley Scott really wanted to make, which resulted in what was called the director's cut, which was released in 1992. Ridley Scott didn't have actually anything to do with that release of the film. It was sort of the producers that put that out there. And then in 2007, Ridley Scott got the chance to go back and properly make his version of the film, and that's the final cut. And there are little other versions in between, but those are the most significant ones. So yeah, Blade Runner 2049. William, do you want to give us an overview of this new iteration of Blade Runner?
Alrighty, so Blade Runner 2049 is directed by Denis Villeneuve of Arrival and Prisoners and other great movies. And it stars Ryan Gosling as a replicant cop who is also a Blade Runner. It's set, 30 years after the original? Mm-hmm. And surprisingly, it is a direct sequel, so not a reboot, not a reimagining. A lot of plot points from the original tie in strongly, as well as thematic elements and other bits and pieces, including casting.
Excellent. And we had a discussion before we recorded this, as you might expect we would, about spoilers. So we typically like to keep our new film for spoiler-free, the discussion around our new film spoiler-free. But we kind of felt that, look, if you're going to be listening to this, you've probably watched both the films, and if you haven't, this is your warning now. We're going to be getting into spoilers for both movies, I think to effectively discuss the thematic, abstract, cerebral elements of each of these films. We're going to have to step on some of those spoilers. So you have been warned. Spoilers will start now. All right, who'd like to start us off, and with what film?
Can I just ask, firstly, Ridley Scott, what number film was Blade Runner for him?
His third film.
So straight after Alien and Aliens?
Straight after Alien. Oh, he did The Duelists, he did Alien, and then Blade Runner. Aliens wouldn't come along for another 4 years, which was James Cameron, anyway.
And as you probably know, Tony and Ridley grew up in England working in commercials, TV commercials, before hitting film. And I suppose it's worth noting that one of the most startling things about original Blade Runner is its aesthetic, isn't it? And luckily, I think we'll agree that the 2049 manages to, I was going to say replicate, and that's not fair, and it's not a very good pun either, but at least sort of pay quite significant homage to the production design of the original. But point being that the 1982 version is really known, isn't it, for its look and feel. And so even though it's only his third film, it's got to be that commercials background, I think, isn't it, coming to play?
Absolutely. And he's such a master at packing that screen, that the mise en scène, with just as much stuff that works as possible. And just the beauty of some of those shots. Like I think about Terrell's office, one of the first scenes, and just the golden amber light and the sort of shimmering water on the walls, which I don't really know where that comes from, but it works. And just shadows and beams of light. And,
This film overall is really bold, right? It's at the time it must have been extremely bold, because watching it now it's still very bold, and everything's been taking it off for the last however long it's been. So it's amazing, but the lighting is intense. Like right from the kind of first few shots, it's just like sheets of light coming through these windows in the kind of main office as a replicant's being studied to find out whether he's actually a replicant. And then just everything in the film is bold. The music is outstanding. I love this score. It just transports you to a place, and it's not, for me, it's not necessarily a future considered from our point now, but it's somewhere else. It's somewhere creepy and dark and mysterious, an 80s future.
Absolutely.
And quite retro as well. Like you've got all the synthesizers through there, which is that kind of that imagined future.
But it's also a very 1980s thing, right? Because synths were at the core of soundtrack in the 80s.
Yes.
But yeah, sorry.
You've got piano, and you've got there's quite a lot of different things going on there. You've got different cultural kind of sounds coming through, I guess, to kind of link in with the different mixing of cultures that is happening in this world. So yeah, there's definitely a future sound, but it's also got this. It's very romantic. It's a very romantic.
It's quite melodramatic, the whole film, isn't it?
Yeah, it's also quite optimistic for what is not a very optimistic movie, it feels like. Everything's a major key, everything feels like it's the future. And yet the movie presents a future that is anything but.
And it's interesting what Max touched on just before, that pretty much every dystopian film ever since 1982 has in some way evoked Blade Runner, 1982 Blade Runner, obviously. And I can't count the number of times in a film review that I will have said it is very Blade Runner-esque in its and it'll be everything. It's the swooping cinematography, it's the shots over to the city at night time, where we get our establishing shot of this is the town that we're in, city that we're in. Everything it feels like it derives from Blade Runner. And when I rewatched 1982 Blade Runner the other day, there was this feeling of, I'm not really sure whether this is familiar to me because it's familiar for having seen it before, or actually it's become familiar because every other film I've seen since has in some way either gone with a bit of a Vangelis sounding soundtrack, or the lighting, or just that dystopian feel. Particularly also, the notions of future. I mean, in a way, bless 1982 that they thought that 2019 would look like this. Now we are 2 years off, a year and a half off of 2019. We can chuckle and say, we've still got a wee way to go.
I don't know, though. I mean, not in terms of flying cars and that kind of thing, but you look at some of the overpopulation in large cities in the world, and they are Blade Runner. Like, I think that there is.
And sort of the slum-like quality of it. Yeah, right.
Yeah, and the kind of mixing of cultures and everything that comes with that.
And the rain.
Yeah.
The incessant rain. I mean, honestly, it's a bit like watching Titanic, which I did 3 times in the cinema when it came out, and just needing to go to the loo the whole time. But the incessant rain in Blade Runner, both Blade Runners, just does my head in.
Why Blade Runner is all filmed at night and it's raining and smoky? Do you know why?
No.
Because they were filming on the back lot, and Ridley Scott knew that if they filmed it any other way, it would just show up how fake the back lot was. And so what they did is they stuck all the ducts and all of the inside parts of the building on the outside, and which they influenced architecture. So they actually influenced what would happen in the next 20 years. But yeah, he just thought, I need smoke, smoke and darkness and rain
Yeah.
are my weapons, and I will use them to make this film look amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I always thought it was just a commentary on pollution and climate change.
Well, there's that as well.
I
It
mean,
works
But
narratively.
back in 1982 even.
Even then, yeah, I mean, definitely with the smog and the factions.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's something that's made very, very explicit in 2049, where it's not rain anymore; it's snow and it's smog.
And smog, you're quite right.
Yeah, that's awesome, Jeremy. I mean,
Well,
yeah.
well, let's talk about 2049 because one of the biggest things that hit me from watching this film, I mean, I've seen Blade Runner so many times that I can't remember, but I went and saw this 3 times at the cinema, the new one, and yeah, the biggest thing that hit me was if Blade Runner was this cramped, overcrowded, stuffy, claustrophobic kind of environment, then the new film is very, very sparse and very isolating. And there are times where he goes into the city and it's very cramped, but on a whole, it's Ryan Gosling standing in empty rooms. Even the opening scene with the Batista character, I don't know what his character's name is. His house is very different to the homes that were in the original
Yeah.
Blade Runner. Like
Yeah.
the original one, everything was stuffed with things.
Well, and it's in the middle of nowhere, effectively, right? So we're looking at a lot more desert, and as you say, a lot more nothingness.
Did you know that film, that scene as well, was the original opening of one of the drafts of the original film? The Deckard was going to arrive just like that and rip the jaw out of the Vulcan, and you were going to see the serial number on the jaw.
That's pretty
Oh.
interesting.
So the writer, who's the original writer of the story as well,
Yeah.
came and kind of brought that that scene with the pot boiling. All of that was always in that.
Oh, that's wonderful.
That's a nice kind of geeky little tie-in for the people that are kind of interested in those things. Eh?
But also for the people who care. Like I think it was terrific that I don't know who I doubt very much it's Villeneuve, but whoever casts the writers, if you will, I think it's terrific that they went with I now forget his name,
Hampton?
Fincher Hampton or
Yeah.
something. Him as the old timer from the original, plus the new chap who'd done Green Lantern and if not a Thor, then something or other.
Logan?
A Logan, that's right. So sort of a young blood who's able to get a relationship drama like Logan, because that's effectively what Logan was, wasn't it? A father-son drama. So I like the potential tie in there, and keep it pacey. So yeah, I think that was terrific. Rather than just going, okay, can we get some people who want to write the new Blade Runner movie?
Yeah,
Yeah, I feel like that kind of speaks to what this film is, and it feels a little bit like a current contemporary kind of experiment, a little bit in blockbusters and doing a really authentic blockbuster. I guess they believed that there was enough of a current and backswell of kind of affect for the old film that this could actually really get off the ground. And I found it really interesting, the reception that it, with all this build up and all this buzz from kind of critics and people that are fans, that it still didn't really it looks like it's not doing very well at the box office.
no,
right?
definitely not.
And now they're putting out these terrible little adverts on I guess it's like a trailer on Facebook, and it's just kind of turned it from like, they had beautiful trailers before, now they've cut it down to like a minute, and it's just like goes through the kind of basic plot points, and it's like replicants, danger, and like kind of
Right.
It's now they're like, okay, let's drum up support quickly.
Right. So
But anyway, the point was kind of an experiment in doing a blockbuster that is a bit more intelligent. It can handle being really long
Much
because
slower in pace.
it's got enough substance that we might actually get people along and build a kind of a bit more of a movement for this film rather than just being a crappy kind of blockbuster, which I feel like we haven't had an interesting blockbuster for a while, have we? Really?
Since Mad Max, probably.
Oh, that was
Yeah.
such a good film.
And
I agree with you,
Avengers, this definitely isn't, right? In its feel or its treatment or anything. So just because I haven't followed all this, so you're telling me that the critics generally loved Blade Runner, the fans generally loved Blade Runner, and everyone's seen it now, and now the box office has just gone.
Yeah, it was just a
has it?
disappointing opening, and not much legs, which is really, really unfortunate.
So that means that's because people aren't going. So why are the civilian population, if you will, the non-critics, the non-fans, if everybody's saying, hey, buzz, this is great, why are they not going? I could understand if they were going and then going, oh, what? That was really
But
slow.
I think that is happening. I think that is
A little
happening.
bit,
I think that people going, there is an element of marketing this film, which is what happened with the original as well. Marketing it as a big action film, and it's coming out at the same time as these new Star Wars films and the big Marvel films, which is effectively what was happening back in the 80s, which is you had Indiana Jones,
The
had just
Star
come
Wars
out,
films.
Star
Right,
Wars,
yeah.
E.T. had just come
Yeah.
out, and people were expecting an action film, one of those blockbusters that you're talking about that kind of is a bit more by the numbers. So I would think that, I've heard people who said, oh, it's so slow and boring. I'm like, well, what are you're going and expecting something that it's not.
Yeah.
So I think someone described Blade Runner as like a big budget sci-fi art film.
Yeah.
And it is. And
Yeah.
I think the new film, they've done a lovely job of melding. I think the original is more of an art film than the new one. But they've done a really good job in this new one of kind of having their cake and eating it too. But maybe it just still
And
doesn't
then,
work.
I mean, making sure tonally it feels one of a piece with the original
Yes.
as well. With the set design, the art design as a whole is amazing in that one.
There's so many bold choices, like
Yeah.
just really interesting. Like even though we can talk about the sexual politics soon, because I think that's an interesting discussion. But like that scene in Las Vegas with the big massive statues of the woman
Yeah.
in heels
Yeah.
and
Holy moly.
with the bees. I mean, just as the bees didn't need to be there in terms of plot, but man, it's a lovely image. Just really.
You mentioned the
impressive.
lighting from the original film, and luckily, before I re-saw the original, I saw this fantastic clip. It's not very long. It's Ridley Scott talking in his incredibly dry way. Sorry, Ridley.
I've got the camera there.
About his favourite scene. And his favourite scene, if I remember rightly, his favourite scene is the introduction of Rachel meeting Deckard, right? And he talked about, and then the clip gets really interesting when he talks about how he used in-camera effects to create that sort of trickly water reflection on the walls and all that sort of thing, simply by smashing a mirror up and popping it in trays of water around the place so that the light would reflect, I don't know. Not the scientist at the table. Right, which is beautiful. So the minute that they did that in 2049, shamelessly, there was rather than going, oh, you're such a copycat, it was a lovely feeling of, oh, there's a real consistency here. Even 30 years on. And similarly with the lighting, in the opening scene of 2049, I was so struck by the fact that effectively, Agent K is walking into a completely dark room and nobody puts any lights on. And so when his quarry walks in and is sort of standing in the gloom, you can still see exactly what you need to be able to see. And it's the same with the first film. There isn't really very much lighting. In the Tyrell Corporation scenes in particular, and yet there's some miracle of you haven't even put a light on and I'm still able to see the bits that are necessary. Although I chuckled like anything in 2049 when the evil replicant woman comes into Robin Wright's office and flicks a light on and says it's far too dark in here or something like that, and I laughed because that's how I would be.
I want to talk about her because she, for me, like the acting in this film, the new film, I thought was phenomenal. Like there's some really lovely moments. Like for instance, when Ryan Gosling is mourning the loss of Joy, and it's just a moment with him and the prostitute woman, and they don't say anything, and it's just that he's mourning because they've had this kind of connection, But that's not actually what I want to talk about. I want to talk about Luv, the villain of the piece.
Yes. Sylvia
She's
Hoeks.
Fantastic.
Really good.
She just did so much with her lines are not. Whatever she says, she usually isn't actually meaning what she's saying. Just the subtleties with which she was creating that character just blew me away.
And there's been some criticism from feminist quarters of the role modelling or the sexual politics isn't that great in 2049. But I think that she is a real case. She and Robin Wright, for obvious reasons, are very, very strong characters, not sexualized. Very much an evocation of Rachel with the hair and the lipstick and whatnot, but sort of an evil Rachel, if you will. And I thought she was terrific, steely. Really steely.
And also, it wasn't clear to me until really quite far into the piece that she was the villain.
Yeah.
And initially I thought she was, they set her up kind of as the love interest because she's introduced in the same way that Rachel was introduced. Like you said, she looks similar. There's sort of this question of a child floating around. I thought it was her. And they really design this film, you don't know who is who until you need to, and until it matters in the story. It's pretty masterful.
I really like that. I love that unfolding of revelation for the characters. And I wanted to very briefly touch upon my favourite moment was a glimmer when Agent K returns to the LAPD and he's walking down the corridor and there are all these human police officers walking past him. And Ryan Gosling flinches ever so slightly just before one of the cops says, what's the...
Skin job.
That's right, skin job or something. And there was such a lovely look on Ryan Gosling's face, quite aside from the fact that it's really hard for Ryan not to look lovely generally, but no. But there was a lovely look of preemptive sort of,
like a child reacting to a bully or something.
That's right, absolutely. Like, I know what he's going to say, I've experienced this before, and I thought, well, that's interesting. So therefore he knows that he's a replicant, you know, you infer from all these things. And then it gets terribly interesting, well, I thought, for a while. And I loved the sort of Pinocchio-esque aspect of this created boy who just wants a father and wants to be a real boy.
And it's a flip on the original film. It's like, is this person, you know, I guess there's a big debate about whether or not Deckard is a replicant, but there is an argument to be made there that he's a human realizing he's a replicant. Well, in this film, it's like setting it up that he's a replicant man realizing he's a human, you know,
or hoping and thinking maybe he's a human, and therefore getting on that kind of trip, only to then, you know,
find out he's not.
Yeah, it's devastating.
I also love how, while this is happening, like running parallel is basically Spike Jonze's Her, like crammed into this movie as a mini movie by itself. It's amazing. Just and kind of is a reflection on the Ryan Gosling character, the Joi character. I really enjoyed like the writing and
me too.
All of the ethics and the huge sci-fi ideas behind.
So did I.
What is consciousness and what is having a soul? What is being alive actually mean?
They were able to have all of those discussions without having those discussions. Like none of it was like
we weren't told
you do have a soul, Joi, because I love you. It wasn't like that. It was
it's ambiguous in the right way. Like as the audience, you kind of don't know. A lot of people are discussing this online and saying, some people say no, she was just a really advanced AI that was reacting to what he was saying.
They kind of push that at the end when Ryan Gosling looks at this massive projection, which is obviously his girlfriend's a projection as well, but this one's a massive one. But she's much more clear in her kind of direct sex appeal, so it kind of makes you think, geez, maybe... And it says, I can give you everything you want, or something. I'll tell you what you want. And so she kind of reflects his own little girlfriend.
But that big figure is the girlfriend, right? It is. It's the. I mean,
it is.
you know, it's only because
AI.
she's a product, exactly.
Right.
And you know that how every time his phone tings and the
Peter and the Wolf. That's
right. That's true. Do. She says, "Oh, I see you're a customer. I hope you're satisfied with our product." You know.
I didn't realize this until the third viewing. You know, well, I realized the first part of this, which is that they have this really like the Her moment where they have the kind of three-way sex scene, but it's, you know, that kind of scene, but it's very well done. I thought it's very, you kind of the complicatedness of it is fully there with the two sets of hands, but then you also fully are invested in their relationship, that it's really quite lovely. And then the moment that it cuts from them having sex, it cuts to a shot of the city with the shot of Joi, and it completely undercuts everything that's just happened.
Because it shows that she is just a mechanism for your pleasure or whatever, product.
Yeah. And then that scene at the end, when this is the part that hit me, I was like, he's looking at this version of Joi, and she's all like pouty lips, and she's flirting with him, and she's stark naked, and she's got black eyes, I think. Her eyes are blacked out. And she says, "Yeah, you were good, Joe." And that's the moment that his character realizes that what truly matters is this love between Harrison Ford and his daughter, or potential, that relationship. And he realizes that because he's connecting that with the miracle that he had with Joi. And so it's like, in the one hand, you've got this very real scene between the two of them that's undercut by the product. And then at the end of that, you've got that encounter with the product giving him that revelation. That's really nuanced and complex. Very impressive storytelling.
I think that's all that stuff is all. We kind of already mentioned this, but that's the best part of the film for me is that relation. I love that relationship, and I guess that's
between Agent K and Joi.
Yeah. And I guess that's the first kind of half of the film. Interestingly enough, I fell down more on the situation with the child and Deckard. When he goes to see Deckard, it's like obviously a beautiful situation and it's beautiful design stuff, but there's moments that lack tension in it. I found where, for example, when I mean, the fact that it's quite long and meandering doesn't help that, but so he goes to see Deckard, and there's a fantastic kind of arty idea here where Elvis is projected on the screen, and it's
so cool.
very jarring.
So cool.
Yeah.
I love the
It's
idea.
a fight scene inside this environment.
Yeah.
And
I
it's
love
evoking
that.
the old film as well when they're fighting in the building. Carry on.
And that's all fantastic. Love the idea, but then the fight itself, I'm like, I just felt like it didn't have any tension. Probably because I knew that they are going to get together and kind of talk it out soon. And when it finishes, it's kind of just like, oh, okay.
Maybe we should go get a drink.
Yeah. It's just
Fair enough.
so lacks tension there. And there was
But
there was
isn't
another
that, but
moment.
just to respond to that, isn't that part and parcel of it's not being a Marvel movie, and it's being, because it isn't about two superheroes, it's about one who's 30 years retired, and one who is an updated model who's going to be stronger anyway. So it's very unequal anyway. And so isn't that part and parcel of what we respect about 2049, which is it's being a more intellectual sci-fi movie than an action movie?
Partly, but then it's kind of like, why do you have the fights so centrally, like these kind of really
But isn't it-
classic, like punching each other, like.
But isn't it because this is like learned behaviour? This is like what I mean. This is what they both spent their whole lives doing, which is finding, being Blade Runners,
Well, then they're definitely.
and finding replicants and killing them. Which, in a way, is each of them, because actually both of them are replicants.
Wait, but is
and-
Deckard a replicant?
well, when you read all the behind-the-scenes stuff, people have
It's either way. It's either way.
I think
way.
the new film actually, it's still pretty vague. Like,
They did
Yeah.
such a good
Yeah.
job of
They did
acknowledging
do that,
it
yeah.
without giving Jared Leto's speech. Yes,
But that's
no.
interesting. If that is the case, then the director's definitely trying to have his cake and eat it too, because he's making a comment on the culture of needing a fight scene at the same time that they're kind of
But we're not gonna do this full
needing
on.
that fight scene
Yeah.
for people that want it in their audience. So maybe that's where the real tension and whether this film actually succeeds and why it's not doing so well at the box office is, because it kind of doesn't give people enough of the fight scenes that they want, but the people that are artsy about it kind of.
Yeah,
That's
I
so
think there's something to be said for that. What I will say as well, just back to what you're saying. I mean, Ryan Gosling, for most of the fight, he has taken the punches. You know, it's not really a fight.
That's true.
no,
That's true.
because he's a
He's kind
stronger
He's just
version
like,
of it.
He's, I don't want to do this. Punch.
Yeah.
He punched in the face.
Okay, can I add two more things about the casino thing? So first of all, just awesome world building.
Yeah.
Seeing it reminded me so much of stuff like Children of Men and other post-apocalyptic stuff where you see how people lived and what their lives had become in this horrible, horrible future. And then that's gone. That's gone as well. I mean, it's all deserted. It's a irradiated wasteland. So cool.
Very Kubrick-esque.
And
as
then
well.
also really, really leaning heavily into nostalgia. Like all the music they're listening to is from 1950s.
Yeah.
And then, of course, linking on later where nostalgia literally is shot in the head. Oh my gosh. So good.
Oh yes.
Where what?
With
Who?
Rachel.
With Clone Rachel.
Oh yes.
Yeah. And kind of undercutting this sense of, wasn't everything great? And then the harshness of a future where, no, it's not.
But also that Rachel, right? I haven't checked, but that obviously she wasn't even a computer-generated Sean Young, I think, because she looked different.
Oh, I think it was.
I think it was.
So it was Sean Young providing the voice, and then a body double with the CG young Sean Young.
Oh, because the
Sean Young.
face seemed ever so slightly different from than the original Sean Young Rachel, and I thought, well, are they doing that on purpose? Or maybe it's one of these slightly subliminal things to tell you that this is a clone of Rachel anyway, because this is not Rachel but brought back or whatever. But no, she looked slightly different to me. But as I say, I haven't.
I think it is a mixture of original footage, CGI, body doubles. I think Sean Young actually was her hand in that scene as well.
Oh, cool.
So that was actual Sean Young's voice, though.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, right.
She's credited in the...
Which is interesting because she denounced the film very publicly.
Did she?
Yeah, and told people to boycott the film.
What, the new one?
Yeah, because she wasn't involved. So maybe they got her involved last minute. What I was going to say was, I think what you're picking up on is that you can tell as a human that it's not a human. I
Yes.
think that's more. I don't think it's on purpose. I think it's just that CGI composite.
But maybe
It's
that's
kind of
that's a beautiful part of it, because the audiences are. I mean, as far as I know,
it's
we
not
don't
like
have
the,
any replicants in society.
the horrible CGI monstrosities in Rogue One. Yeah. It's like, ugh.
Yeah. No, but you know what I mean? Like, I mean, perhaps it's either an inadvertent production thing. They couldn't do it any better, but they're like, don't worry about it because the audience doesn't need to believe she's Rachel. Or it's actually on purpose because we are humans watching it. And therefore, yes, you're right. We can tell if something is a little bit off. So could be lots of meanings.
I could be. I don't buy it.
I'm giving too much credit.
The second thing I want to add about the whole Vegas scene and Harrison Ford is it reminded me so much of Force Awakens. I mean, he's basically playing the old Han Solo character.
Yeah.
And what's up with Han Solo being kind of the distant father figure to 80s kids?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
They really played with those expectations because you have Han Solo in Force Awakens. You also have the Indiana Jones
of
remake
course.
with the father son issues there, and so they were playing with the fact that for me as an audience member, I was expecting him to die, and I was expecting Ryan Gosling to be his kid.
Yeah.
And they fully
true.
subverted those expectations. They set them up for us, but they really did subvert that.
The beautiful thing is, Ryan Gosling was so convincing that I thought he was going to be his kid because Ryan Gosling thought he was going to be his kid as well. Do you know what I mean? Agent K believed and wanted to believe so much that I completely bought it and thought, I love this. And can I just say, Incendie is actually my favourite Denis Villeneuve film. And it plays, and admittedly, that was based on a stage play written by somebody else, but then he wrote the screenplay for it. Now, I know that Villeneuve didn't have anything to do with the screenplay of Blade Runner, but I like the fact that the two films play very much around notions of who is my parent and who is my child, and then overturns or really messes with expectations. Have you guys seen Incendie?
I have not.
Oh, I will lend it to all of you, and I will spoiler it no further. But it is basically a quest to figure out who was my father, basically.
Cool.
By two twins after their mother dies, and that's not spoilering at all. That's the thrust of it. But really fantastic. Similar sorts of themes, so perhaps we'll come back to a discussion on that once you've seen it.
I love how like Agent K never asked the question because the film would be cut much shorter if he did. If he just said to Deckard, hey, I'm your son, and Deckard said,
No, you're not. Yeah, that's
And
true.
he often says the kid.
Yeah.
You know, this sort of gender neutral way. I'm like, very clever.
Yeah. Yes,
Very
that's
clever.
true, and I didn't pick up on that. So when it came back, the flashback to that I taught her how to tutu with the data and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. I thought, that's convenient.
So in terms of gender politics, I felt that, watching. I was talking to my friend about it when I saw it the other night, and so let's talk about the new film because I think the old film's a whole other bag of chips. But
Oh boy,
the new film. I mean, there are seven significant female characters. So in terms of representation, there is a strong range of really interesting characters in this film who are female. But at the end, and they like we said, I feel like they are working within that space of the sexual politics being relatively complicated. But it is still, like I think you said, it's still a whole lot of naked women around.
I didn't like you say what you like about the bees in Las Vegas and how they weren't necessary, but it works nicely. I feel very strongly that the huge naked statues were completely unnecessary.
Oh, I feel the opposite. I thought it gave you such a good kind of glimpse into this world of
Depravity.
Yeah, and of just absolute
Objectification.
Yeah, of everything. I mean, everything that Vegas stood for, and now it's all gone, like Ozymandias.
Yeah, I mean, like I hear you and it works on that level, but then at the same time, if you're not inferring those ideas or themes, you're still seeing buxom booty, and there's still a part of...
It makes it very tricky, you're right.
It's not necessary. There are other ways of... I mean, I'm sure I could come up with a list of other ways that you can demonstrate a decrepit den of iniquity, and that there once was depravity,
You'd think if they are really trying to reflect on the gender politics of the so-called past, then they would really focus on making sure their own politics in the film are squeaky clean, so that they can't be criticised as being hypocrites.
I mean, there was male nudity in there as well, but not in the same way that
When?
there was a few penises around. There was bodies
In
and,
Las Vegas?
not in Las Vegas, but throughout the film.
Oh.
Yeah, there was some bodies lying on in the morgue. I mean, it's not sexualized in any way.
No, but I mean, what a rip-off for female viewers.
Yeah.
Or we'll give you a dead fat guy. We'll give you a dead fat guy on a slab. There you
Cold
go.
penis for you?
Okay, exactly. And now let's go to Las Vegas, or let's see a hologram of a woman.
But
who
then
will...
that's not too sexualized, is it either? Like big kind of...
The
They are big
holograms.
boobs, but the holograms are, but the big boobs of a concrete woman.
I don't know. They were pretty sexual. They're like arching their backs.
Yeah,
But are they
high-heeled
wide
shoes.
open.
I
But
mean,
that's-
it's all the
But
archetypes
is that meant
of...
to be getting guys going? Like, oh yeah,
Well, no,
or is
not-
it meant to be
It's a commentary.
critically?
yeah.
It's absolute commentary. But I was thinking of you, Sarah, when I watched it one of the times. I just thought, it is. It's still boobs and tits and
Yeah.
Well, boobs and tits are the same thing, but yeah.
You said, Jeremy, that you thought that the sex scene in the 2049 film was well done with the two females and Ryan Gosling's character and so on. And I've got to say, I thought this is fascinating. It's intellectually very interesting, and it is completely... it is not... There's not a frisson of excitement, emotional or sexual, whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, I
working
would
here
agree.
at all.
I would agree with that. It
So-
was too complicated to be a scene. It was too much going on, I think. for that
Right.
To be
So
achieved.
for me, my brain was going, "Oh, that's interesting." So it also reminded me a bit of Ghost. Have you seen Ghost, where
Yeah.
Whoopi Goldberg becomes the Patrick Swayze character and so on? But I was like, "Oh, this is very interesting." In a way that you, William, touched upon some of the technology in the 2049 film, and I love seeing genuine sci-fi sort of advancements in technology. And I thought that Joi as a character was a fascinating conceit. Not even a conceit, fascinating type of advanced technology and whatnot. But the sex scene, and I don't know, you're right, I don't know that I was supposed to feel, oh, there's love here or there's sex here, but it certainly didn't hit in that way.
Well, let's talk about the sex scene in the original film.
Oh my gosh.
Because that, for me, is the one thing, and I love that movie, but that's the one thing that makes me go, oh, every time. Just the way that he throws her around and he
slams the door.
He effectively rapes her. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, she kind of starts consenting, but in light of all the discussion that we're having at the moment about consent, it ain't. She says... She very clearly is trying to leave.
It's also pretty fascinating how in the new movie they kind of retcon it to no, it was true love, at first sight. Yeah.
I mean, one has to be so careful, doesn't one? I mean, the first thing I would say is, but that is so 1980s.
Mm.
I mean, every movie had some kind of like...
The anti-hero.
some kind of like buff guy, being a little bit rough, but even Indiana Jones, in that sort of masculine, hyper-masculine sort of way, and the woman being overcome with, oh, I can't resist you. Do you know what I mean? And in the 80s, you didn't think, hold on, that looked a little bit non-consensual or anything. Do you know what I mean? So I reckon it's very much with our 30 years on eyes that we look back at 1982, 35 years, and go, ugh, that seems awkward, because she does consent. She does soften. It's kind of composed as one of those, I'm so cross with you, I'm leaving. No, you won't. But wait, but we're so inextricably... It's like in A History of Violence, where Maria... what's her name? Maria Bello and Viggo Mortensen end up having sex on the stairs. It's incredibly violent, incredibly angry to start with, and then of course it's this whole thing of, but we're so passionate for each other that we can't resist, and blah blah blah. I think it's more like that, the 82 film.
The original has both the question of consciousness and AI and genetics, but then the new one kind of adds a much bigger picture of this political kind of question of like, can we bring the replicants up to the status of the humans? And for me, that felt a little bit too much of a large scale thing to start kind of trying to delve into a little bit.
I agree.
When we see the resistance appear in this film,
it's like Hunger Games.
It just turns up and it's kind of like we don't know where they came from, we didn't know who they are, they don't have a strong story, and so I think the smaller scale personal style of the original is just a bit more rotund and tighter, and that's one of the great things about that film is it's a small scale story which it does have major significance in a bigger picture, but it's not trying to overstate that, I think.
And I agree with you. The resistance aspect of the 2049 film didn't interest me at all. Whereas all I was interested in is this notion of this Pinocchio who's like, am I a real boy?
Yeah.
And what might that mean for me? And therefore, are you my father? And that's sort of the personal story.
Yeah.
And I was so glad that we got to see Deckard meet his daughter at the end. I had a terrible feeling because you'll remember that Deckard and Agent K are on the steps in the snow, and then Deckard goes up into the building, and we stay with Ryan Gosling for quite some time. And I thought, are they going to do that clever thing where they're like, you don't need to see it, you know what's going on inside? And then they cut, and he did come in, and it didn't give us very much, but I'm glad that they did, because that connection and reunion and acknowledgement was very meaningful for me. That's the aspect of the film that I thought was interesting.
And it links with the original, in that the original ended on a similar shot like that, just a kind of strange shot of Deckard and then cut to black. Not the original ends with the lift closing, and by the original I mean the final cut version.
And I thought the scenes of Ryan Gosling in the snow with the snowflakes, that was a really cool, just visual connection to Tears in the Rain and all that from the '82.
Totally.
Well, I mean, it's Roy Batty, isn't it?
Yeah.
He is Roy Batty. He's dying, and he's realizing what matters most, and it's Deckard's life.
I mean, that's another great thing about the original, having this kind of antagonist who you can have so much sympathy for in the end point. And Rutger Hauer is awesome. I love him.
He's off the chain, yeah.
But in that context of the old one, the original, it's so nice that, I mean, they just nailed that. We talked about before about it being personal film, and it really is. It's this melodramatic. It's this beautiful film noir.
We haven't really talked about that, have we?
No.
Future noir.
Yeah. Neo noir, and probably one of the early neo noirs, and still probably the best.
And
cyberpunk.
cyberpunk.
They created that. I mean, Blade Runner created that whole.
I was going to say, it's groundbreaking, really, isn't it? I mean, that's the thing that 2049 will never have, and it can't help it, is that we've always had an original Blade Runner now. Somebody's done that.
Even like in terms of the special effects. So the first time I saw Blade Runner was on a plane, which is not the right place to watch Blade. Really small screen, crappy sound, and then seeing it much later and just reveling in how awesome the special effects are. Oh my gosh, especially if you compare this to a previous cinema context film, Fifth Element. I mean, in that film, it looks very cartoony and everything is very composited. But I think Blade Runner looks like a movie that was made, 5 years ago, even. Or 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Like
it's not too dated at
so
all,
convincing
is it? No.
how they use the matte paintings and miniatures.
It's all. There's no computer. It was before computers, so it's all in camera, and it's just astounding. I studied this film in year 13, and I remember we all had to guess when the film came out. I mean, I knew, so I had to be quiet. But my peers at the time were guessing, 5 years previous. Apart from the hairdos of some of the girls, really, it's only it's the perms that come out. I think that's.
I do love how in the new one, Atari and Pan Am are still like big deals.
And Sony, obviously, because they've released it. But but it is. It's nice that Atari is still a big deal, isn't it? That's really cute.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Cinema in Context. If you enjoyed our podcast, then please share it with your film-loving friends. You can listen to Cinema in Context through SoundCloud or through Apple Podcasts. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or even on YouTube, which are also great places to let us know what you think of this episode, or give us suggestions for future films to discuss or compare. Look out for our next episode in a month's time, and until then, ka kite anō.